filling in for Alan Stiles here, taking you up until 2 p.m. Got Kyle Ledbetter here behind the glass. Sacramento Kings just wrapped up their practice the day after a unfortunate ending that led to their fifth straight loss, and this was against the Detroit Pistons, taking them to 13-18 on the season. We got Fox 40's Sean Cunningham joining us today, who was at practice. Sean, appreciate you hopping on, man. How are you doing? Staying safe in the rainy weather?
Yeah, I mean, I stepped outside to be able to come on the radio with you right now, Brendan, and you know how I hate the cold and rain and gray weather and all that. So I hope you appreciate me stepping out into the elements to join you, my friend. How are you?
I do. I very much appreciate it. I'm doing good. I know how difficult that can be for you, so appreciate you weathering through all that. I want to throw it to you just vaguely at first. It looked like DeMar DeRozan, Keegan Murray, Mike Brown at practice today. Just what if you had to pick, one or two things that are kind of the key standouts? What really made your ears perk at today's practice?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably I think there was a moment I had really honestly just tweeted a second ago. Mike Brown and De'Aaron Fox kind of pulling them aside, having a conversation. And, I think it'll bring out the lip read experts, and people will probably dissect it much like the Zapruder film. I mean, it's going to go over probably the fan base pretty well, seeing, Mike have him have this little conversation. And I think it obviously had to do with last night, and obviously how I think him trying to implore or at least communicate to De'Aaron and realize that it wasn't just that moment that cost him the game and how just despicable the fourth quarter was and things like that. But certainly, De'Aaron Fox's comments didn't land well last night, and they typically haven't. I mean, this is kind of who he is, and I think it's funny that people kind of continue to be surprised by what De'Aaron Fox says and does after losses, and this is just kind of who he is. Everyone's different, and he's not going to be anything that he's not. So that was to the media, and today, you have a day later, he kind of, cooler heads kind of prevail a little bit, and he's able to stand up in front of the team and take accountability, and that's ultimately the best action to do it. I know, fans and media will think that they're entitled to hear from them right after the game when things are emotional, but he's not one to dwell on things, and he just kind of ripped the Band-Aid and move on. So to hear that he had that moment, I think was good, but also seeing Mike Brown have that moment with him, the pull-aside moment, I think was good. But even DeMar DeRozan just saying how naturally a conversation among the team today just kind of surfaced, and they had a really good conversation. And these are those tough look in the mirror and have these conversation type things that happen with teams when they're in the middle of a prolonged losing streak, and that's certainly what happened today. And could all be for naught if they can't get a win, and it's just the pressure is mounting with a win. And I think it's big to point out, and I think it goes with this team, is the fact that once you think you've seen it all, or just when you think you've reached your lowest point, and certainly guys were talking about that after the loss to the Pacers, the NBA can be a cruel SOB at times, and it can show you very quickly how it just when you think you're lower, it can get a lot lower.
Yeah, extended that losing streak up to 5 with the, tragic, I guess you'd say, ending to that Pistons game. But to your point about De'Aaron, I've been trying to, my point throughout this whole show has been, it's about the accountability that may or may not be taking place behind closed doors. And as you said, got some clarity today on that conversation did happen. But as somebody that's covered Fox since he came into the league, you mentioned it a bit, like this is kind of how he gets after losses, and I think it's understandably so. I think it's actually kind of him showing his frustration. But what did you make of the comments? Obviously, all the backlash is kind of expected, but do you feel the same way that I feel like what he's saying of it doesn't really matter what I say in media here?
Yeah, I mean, he's never going to be what people want him to be. He's somebody who is just kind of is who he is. And people lead in different ways, and he's always a person who thinks he leads by example. There's certainly my phone is going off right now, and I think some bad stuff has just happened to Mike Brown and the Sacramento Kings. But
Oh,
there, yeah.
Sean. Okay, let's just pivot, Sean. The Kings are parting ways with head coach Mike Brown. Sean Charania. Sean, I won't keep you long because I'm sure that
we have it first.
Breaking news. I won't keep you long because I'm sure there's work you got to do with this. Wow. I mean, you just talked to Mike.
Yeah. The timing is quite wild. I would not have imagined that he would have been, if they were going to pull the Band-Aid off or to part ways with Mike Brown, I wouldn't have imagined that would have happened moments after speaking with him. I mean, literally, we're talking within the past 10 minutes. We just wrapped up speaking to Mike Brown as the head coach of the Sacramento Kings, and that appears to be not the case at the moment. So, yeah.
Where do you go from here, Sean? Like, how?
You go to LA, and I would imagine, depending upon what coaching staff remains, I would imagine you'd see the likes of Jay Triano or even brace yourself, Doug Christie, act in the interim. So, they have a very capable head coach in Jay Triano who has plenty of experience, has been to NBA Finals, who's been a coach of the year. And, but no, this is pretty shocking. I would imagine that, look, when things are going the way they are, you shouldn't be shocked when a coach is fired, no matter, even if they just got an extension or not. That being said, the nature of how today went, where you have a practice and you're boarding a flight to LA and you just had Mike Brown speak to the media, that part is rather wild. And I've covered this team since 2001, and I don't recall. Certainly, there's been head-scratching moves and things that boggle the mind. This is look. The departure of Mike Brown is not the most boggling of the mind. It's just how it just happened at this moment, just now, and how the day had played out. Certainly is a head-scratcher.
Absolutely. And last thing I got for you, I'm a little jealous, by the way, that was my last opportunity to talk to Mike Brown in a while. And, sitting here, but it is what it is, I guess. I had been under the thought of, if they did go in this direction, that De'Aaron Fox would be the next domino to fall. And we may have already been at that point. Obviously, it seemed to be sort of pointing towards that. But it seemed like Mike Brown, or De'Aaron Fox more so, was very much a Mike Brown guy. And from your impression, do you think that this is kind of spelling the end of De'Aaron in Sacramento? And again, maybe we were already at that point.
Yeah, I don't know, man. That's a tough question to ask. This literally just kind of broke, and there's a lot of ways to react to it, but I haven't had the moment to kind of touch base with anybody and talk and kind of hear some thoughts. But certainly this organization is not happy with where things were going. That's an understatement. I was looking at records, just what would have to happen in order for this team to even match the record for last year with the way this Western Conference is. And it would take a pretty Herculean effort to even match last year's record. So, boy, yeah, this is going to be a fun one. My day just got a lot more busy, and I hope you can understand that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm going to get you out of here, Sean. Appreciate you hopping on.
Thanks,
interesting timing, man. Fox 40, Sean Cunningham, right after practice, as Mike Brown gets let go from the Sacramento Kings. Thanks for taking the time, man. Wow. So, Mike Brown's done. They couldn't have done this like 2 hours ago.
Wow.
I get 20 minutes of talking about this.
They had him go out to practice. Well, I guess now we know what he was saying to De'Aaron Fox.
Oh, my gosh,
I guess now we know what
Kyle.
they were talking about.
Oh, my gosh. Okay.
Okay, this is a lot.
This is a lot.
Yeah. So, Mike, for those who are just tuning in right now, because I'm sure there's a lot of us, Mike Brown has just been relieved of his duties by the Sacramento Kings. This according to Shams Charania at 1:36 p.m. And I think we're going to have quite a weekend because the Kings are leaving for Los Angeles in a few hours. We don't know who is going to be coaching the Kings. We don't know which members of the coaching staff are about to be retained. This is going to be quite an interesting few hours because we're going to have all sorts of people talking about what's going to happen next between De'Aaron and everything else, but I'm just curious how they're going to get through this weekend.
Me too, Kyle. I don't know what happens from here. Like you heard Sean mention Doug Christie's name. That's what I thought would probably be the next step if they went in this direction. We also mentioned earlier why I personally don't think that would be the best course of action. But this feels like calling this year a failure already. No, I mean, how do you bounce back from this? We talk like an interim head coach isn't turning this around.
This is not just a failure. This is a failure of colossal proportions. I mean, think about this. Luke Walton with the Sacramento Kings lasted just as long as Mike Brown. Mike Brown, who won a Coach of the Year, made it approximately 20 games longer than Luke Walton. I mean, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy what is happening right now. Shams just had a follow-up as well to the original report. Kings fire Mike Brown in the midst of a 5-game losing streak, 12 of their last 17, and have lost an NBA high 13 clutch games this season. Brown won Coach of the Year in 2022-2023 when he led the Kings to the postseason, snapping a U.S. sports record 17-year playoff drought, which is crazy. Is it possible? This guy won unanimous Coach of the Year just a couple of years ago. Is it even possible for a coach to make it 3 years in Sacramento? If we're saying Mike Brown is out 18 losses into the third season, I mean, this is a massive turn of events for the Sacramento Kings. Massive.
It is. It might be cooked from here, Kyle. I don't know how they continue to recover from this. I'm a little upset that this happened at the end of the show because there's so much to unpack here. We're going to have Scott Marsh coming on from 2 to 6 after here, so definitely be sure to stay tuned for the rest of what's going on there. But, people saying, is it not a failure already? Gilbert here in the SAC chat. Again, there's 51 games left in this year. It's too far in to say, oh, we're still early, but there's still a lot of games left. And that's the reality of this. And everybody, as Sam Amick said in the clip we played a little bit earlier, he's talking to people, that neutral parties in this, that are saying, this is a talented team. I don't understand why they're struggling to the extent that they are. And that is the reality of this. And I don't know what the next domino is from here. As I said earlier, I think that De'Aaron is all but done at this point in Sacramento. Why would he want to stick around for another coaching change?
I just don't know why we're hitting the panic button now. I mean, you can say something needs to change, and we talked about before the trade deadline, but we're 31 games into this season. That is an incredible turn of events for the Sacramento Kings. We don't know who's going to be retained from the coaching staff. You and Frankie just talked about there's an incredible amount of loyalty there. A lot of players liked Mike Brown and were willing to ride for Mike Brown. This is an incredible turn of events, not just for this season, but for the direction of the franchise. Because as we've been talking about, there's not a, so remember when Atlanta got rid of Nate McMillan and Quinn Snyder was ready to go right away and they just gave him the full-time job. That doesn't exist in this situation. This is we are in all essence punting on the season.
That's what it feels like at this point. And I honestly don't know how to take it another way. I think that is where we're at. And I guess this is the front office winning out, I guess you could say. Not that they couldn't eventually also be replaced this offseason, but the blame got placed on the coaching staff. And clearly, because he's no longer in a job. And I almost just want to take a second, and this is from a more personal standpoint, to say how much I enjoyed Mike Brown as a coach, just as a person in general. And I think that was reciprocated by a lot of his staff, players, different people within the Kings organization. But this is a massive changeup, and I don't know where you go from here. My guess is that we're talking Doug Christie, who I think is underqualified to be a head coach in this league. I'm a big fan of Doug Christie, and I think that it's just a process before you eventually reach that spot. And I don't think that he's necessarily had the reps in this coaching spot to eventually be the guy to replace it. Is it going to be Jay Triano? Is he fine stepping into that spot at this point in his career. That would feel very Alvin Gentry to me, where it's like substitute teacher vibes.
Hey, Alvin's still here. You want to slide Alvin back into the coaching role?
Alvin is still here. Manny Too Legit mentions Luke Laux in the comments. I struggle to see that. Is Luke Laux going to be willing to take his mentor's spot in this head coaching role? It is, this is quite a move from the Kings right at the end of this here, as Scott Marsh is joining me as well. Scott, Mike Brown out of this Kings job.
Brendan, it is huge news, obviously, and I feel terrible for Mike Brown because there's so many things when you look at it that aren't necessarily his fault. But if we're being honest and realistic about it, it's not shocking whatsoever. I mean, what we saw last night was unacceptable.
Yeah.
Completely unacceptable. There was no way the Kings should have lost that game last night. And whether De'Aaron didn't execute or not, it doesn't matter. It is the coach's responsibility in that situation to make sure that doesn't happen. That's coming off a team that, I don't know what the word you want to use in Indiana in that second half, but tied at halftime to lose by 27.
Yeah, they gave up.
After you can say that, I never like to say players give up. I can't get inside the mindset.
That's fair.
Now, did it look like it?
Right.
Okay. Coming off of 2 back-to-back losses against the Los Angeles Lakers, and we know how that feels when we lose to the Lakers. Coming off a loss up 10 against the Denver Nuggets with 4 minutes to go. All of that on your home floor when you're 6-12. So is this unexpected? I don't think so. How many people left that arena last night and said something is going to happen? That you know what is going to hit the ceiling, right?
Yep.
We all felt that leaving last night. So shocked? No.
Yeah, I mean, the writing was definitely on the wall. Like you said, everybody knew something was going to happen, and this was the obvious, direction that we could see people going in this in a potential trade, and it's just harder to tango when it comes to trades, and that's not to be said that can't still happen throughout the course of this year, but how much do you feel like this is the first domino and you see more things happen down the line? Does this, in your mind, spell the end of De'Aaron Fox in Sacramento?
Well,
if we weren't already there?
A lot of it's going to be determined by De'Aaron Fox, right? And we don't really know what De'Aaron Fox is thinking, right? Sure, he spoke on a podcast with Draymond Green,
right,
and says he wants the team to be a championship competing team, okay? Did they get DeMar for De'Aaron? All accounts was that De'Aaron was the one who brought DeMar in, went and met him at the airport, had dinner with him, was happy about that. That was a big-time move in the offseason. We can question whether it was the right move. Right now, it's not really working, but it seemed like De'Aaron was fully on board with that, right? So is De'Aaron playing possum a little bit right now? I mean, who knows? But, I mean, that is determined by De'Aaron, right? He holds all the cards. The Kings can trade him, but De'Aaron can walk if he wants to as well.
Yeah. So you have a sense of faith potentially still that like an interim head coach could help. 51 games left in this year. There's still a long way to go. So do you think that, there's still – I can't help but think this is all going downhill from here, and it's instant reactions, and those are always a little risky, but the nature of the business, obviously. But do you still feel like an interim could come in and sort of change the energy of this group? All of a sudden, it seems like maybe they're listening to the coach a little bit more. Some trades could help things, but
well, Brendan, you said it. You were ready to come in to do the show before the last 2 minutes plus, the last 10.8, I believe, on the clock, about all the good things the Kings did last night, right? How great Trey Lyles was,
yep,
how they were moving the basketball. So many good things going on, right, with the team that you wanted to talk about that just got blown up because of what happened. So could that happen again? Of course. I mean, should the Kings have won last night? Of course. So are the Kings that far away? No, they're not. Are they a championship team? Of course not. So it depends what's your definition. Is it a team that can compete for a playoff spot, a play-in spot? What are we talking about?
Yeah, and I guess that depends on what De'Aaron's definition is, right? What's going to be enough for him to be convinced to stay around? And I'm at the point, and I think I was already at this point for what it's worth, where we're probably in too deep with the De'Aaron stuff.
Sure, and you have to start thinking about, are the Sacramento Kings just De'Aaron Fox?
Right.
I mean, is that everything? I mean, if you look at it from the last 5 years coming in, almost every move they've made, in a way, has been for De'Aaron Fox. When they moved Halliburton, it was because the Fox-Halliburton combination maybe wasn't the best. It wasn't going to work with both. They decided to move off Tyrese. They brought in Sabonis, a better fit with De'Aaron. every move they've kind of made since this point is because De'Aaron's the leader of this team. Now, is De'Aaron the guy to get you to where you want to go? I mean, that's something the Kings have to think about too.
Yeah, and I think that's a very fair question. I think my holdup is